Welcome to the week 5 update video. We're going to start with a couple of important updates, things I want to draw your attention to, and then we're going to explore a sort of hidden history of eugenics in the United States during the period that we're studying this week. So we'll move right along. We'll start with a week 4 recap. A good week of discussion, more or less, with a couple of important caveats to that. But I did want to address some major issues to this point. The first is the issues surrounding finding primary sources for the project. So I want to just take some time to review how to find sources for the project. We also have a major issue with citations, both in discussion leader assignments and in the discussion. And finally, there still seems to be some confusion about additions versus reactions in discussion. There are some major issues resulting in some significant point reductions. But the first thing I will say before I show you the resources that you have to address these three issues is that it's really, really important, whether it's for discussion, whether it's for your research project, or whether it's for your discussion. I give you pretty extensive feedback on all of these. The important thing with the feedback is that you take the information, the corrections in the feedback, and bring them forward to the next assignment. And I'm noticing that I'm leaving students feedback to improve or to answer different questions or to approach the assignment a different way, and I'm getting a lot of the same stuff in the subsequent assignments. So this tells me that people are not reading or not aware of their feedback. You can find your feedback. If you have trouble finding it, please let me know and I'll let you know where to look for that. The first thing I want to draw your attention to are two files in the Getting Started area of the Engage page. The first one is right here. It is the Finding Non-Textual Sources document. You're going to want to look at that. Of the abstracts that I've looked at, very few actually have primary sources of the type that I'm looking for. So this document is going to give you some information about how to find and also cite your primary sources for the project. The other document is the documentation guidelines. I've noticed only like 3 or 4 students that have been giving me accurate and full citations. So we want to make sure that everyone is reviewing this document. This will show you how to cite the textbook. It will show you how to cite the articles that you're reading, and it will also show you how to cite pretty much anything else that you can find for this class. The other thing I want to draw your attention to, particularly in terms of the discussion for the week, are which of the 4 questions I want you to respond to. There is a discussion question that the discussion leaders are coming up with. You may answer that question as extra credit, but that is not one of the questions that you are required to respond to in your discussion additions for the week. Instead, you're supposed to be answering one of the 4 questions on 2 separate discussions. And what I want you to do, not merely answer the question, but I want you to expand upon or improve upon the existing discussion leader's response. So if you basically rehash or summarize or touch on a lot of the same points that the discussion leader touches on, you're going to get a point deduction. This probably means that you want to focus specifically on the question of context, because there's so much context. You could probably write 3 or 4 full research papers on each one of these documents to talk about the important historical context for the document. So I want you to focus on reworking question 3s on the discussions kind of from here on out. Because again, I'm going to, starting this week, be a lot more strict on whether or not your discussion actually improves upon the existing discussion. Okay, so that concludes the recap portion of the week 5 video. And actually, instead of listening to me drone on for another half hour or so, I think it might be an interesting idea to have you watch a documentary for some extra credit. This is a PBS documentary called The Eugenics Crusade. It is about as I said at the beginning of the video, a sort of hidden history of genetic control or genetic engineering in the United States in the early part of the 20th century. What I want you to do with this, just to give you some practice in talking about context, I believe the Eugenics Crusade is mentioned very, very briefly in a couple of the chapters in the textbook. But what I want you to do is to understand how the ideology that informs this eugenics crusade is related to a lot of important concepts and ideas and themes in American history. So for the extra credit, what I'm going to have you do is I want you to make connections between the documentary, elements of the documentary, and specific sections in the American Yawp textbook. For the first one, I think it will be the most obvious connection that you will make, and subsequent connections that you make will be both more challenging and also worth more in the extra credit. So take a look at that extra credit assignment on the class website. Next week, we'll talk about the emergence of the United States as a superpower, both within the context of the Second World War and the early part of the Cold War. And so next week, I'll probably give you a short recap video, and we might do another documentary. I've been thinking about one in particular that we might want to look at. But I think this is just sort of an interesting diversion for people who are interested in something like this. Okay, take care. Have a good week. If we have any questions about graded abstracts or discussion leader assignments or the project or whatever, feel free to email me. Take care.